Good morning, everybody. It's Scott and Eric here. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that is a little controversial, I think. And what you're going to see is I am the real estate agent, obviously, and then Eric is the attorney. And so he's going to do the attorney thing, which is to give you guys the devil's advocate and the pros, but yet also the cons. So I'm actually really curious to what he has to say because I haven't even heard about what he's going to talk about. So, all right. Today we're going to talk about renting versus buying and why is it so much better, in my humble opinion, to rent, I'm not to buy versus rent, right? Being a homeowner is so much more advantageous. And I'm gonna go through like some basically topics that we can discuss as far as the benefits of renting, and then I'm gonna get Eric's input on it, right? So, Eric, would you not agree, though, to be fair, would you not agree that on average, owning a home is probably better than renting because according to all sources, the National Association of Realtors, economists, and all of this other stuff, I'm going to share an article with you just really quickly right now. And basically what it says is that if you own your own home, you're likely to be 40 times wealthier than a renter. This is an article from from realtor.com, but they're not the only one saying it. Like, even economists say that.
Thank you, Scott, for having me again. Yes, I will agree that owning a home does, on average, result in higher wealth. Okay.
But 40 times the difference. Like, according to this article, the average renter is only worth about $10,000 versus the homeowner is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of, like, on average, like $400,000.
Right. The article is also from published by a realtor or a real estate company.
But
There's
even
some
economists
bias
say
there.
that.
Yes, I will agree on the premise that being a homeowner and paying off a mortgage and getting the appreciation versus a renter that is paying rent and potentially not investing to make up that difference of owning a home would result in that kind of discrepancy in wealth, right? But it's not to say that just because I'm a renter, I'm now doomed to be 40% less wealthier than a homeowner. No,
No, not 40%,
or
40
40
times.
times less wealthier than a homeowner. It's not necessarily the case, especially if you are good at investing and is disciplined in putting away money to grow your wealth, right? And on top of that, in light of recent events regarding what happened in LA with the wildfires, arguably a homeowner who just lost everything in those wildfires has now just shrunk in terms of wealth much lower than, let's say, I was a renter that lost, the property I was renting and all right? Because that's the homeowner's problem. I just lost my personal property, which again, if I have renter's insurance, would pay me, whatever to make it up, right? So, um, it's not that I would say that's easy to just say, all right, on average, yes, a homeowner is going to be 40 times wealthier than a renter. There's more complexities to that.
But yes, there is complexities to that. There is complexities to everything in life. The thing is, and we are very, very saddened by what happened up in North LA County area. I was watching the news, and wow, the devastation is just unbelievable. like just literally entire neighborhoods flattened. Like it's just yeah. So our thoughts and prayers go out to all of the people that have lost their home and family members. With that said, let's continue because here's the thing. Home ownership allows you to build equity as real estate prices go up. And as inflation, and then we've seen inflation, I mean, over the last few years, when interest rate even spiked, to 7, 8%, almost hitting the 9% at one point, right? Um, it made it so that it was very difficult for a lot of new people to become homeowners. However, the thing is, the people who bought, they were in amazing position. And then the other thing is, because inflation has continued to go up, um, the value of something goes up along with it. And so as a result, homeowners have been able to make a lot of money equity wise between, even 21, 22, 23 till now, right? The market has shifted a little bit in the last year or so. But at the end of the day, I mean, I know I sell real estate, so there is a bias here, right? Because I am a real estate broker. I still think it's the best investment because, like, look, I'm probably above average in intelligence. I'm not the smartest guy out there. I'll be the first to admit. And so investing in the stock market and things like that, to me, is just very risky because I don't understand that, right?
Yeah,
Where if you're a homeowner, you're buying a property that you're going to live in anyway, right? And so if you're going to live in that property, you know, like I added this just to be satirical, but you're paying your landlord's mortgage for them.
that, yeah, that is correct. If you're a renter, you are paying your landlords, presumably if they have a mortgage, their mortgage. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so as the equity increases, as things get more expensive, like, I mean, not only are homes getting more expensive, but like eggs and milk and gas and everything is getting more expensive, right? And so as things get more expensive, as a renter, every single year your rent can only go up.
that is true. But I will also point out for those people who is paying an insurance premium, all right, how much has your insurance premium gone every up in terms of owning your home?
Okay, so basically in that case, you just have to
For
move to an
property
area
taxes,
where the insurance is
right?
cheaper. California has one of the lowest property tax, Eric.
Percentage
Nationwide, we
wise,
have one of the lowest.
percentage wise, but then you take 1% of a $10 million house, you still are paying huge, a very high property tax. I will agree. Okay, owning a home, yes, everyone says it builds equity over time, right? You take out a 30-year mortgage, you live in the property 30 years, presumably from after 30 years, that property probably doubled or tripled, right? And you paid off your mortgage and you own that house free and clear. Okay, that's what
Okay.
it's a in terms of an investment vehicle is very unique because you can borrow to buy it, right? Pay down that the mortgage, and so now you own basically that home at some point free and clear, right? And if that
Yes.
is appreciated $3 million when you brought it at $1 million, boom, your net worth has increased to $3 million, right?
Yes.
That's how, and it's as many people say, it's like a forced savings account because you are forced to pay the mortgage, and the mortgage eventually, after you pay off all the interest, right, and the principal amount, that you now own something that's worth a lot more. I
Yes.
completely agree. And that's why real estate is a very strong wealth growing tool.
Yes.
Okay. But on top of that, right, there's also risk
Okay,
involved.
so share with us your risk. And what risks are you referring to?
Well, you're borrowing money, right? Inherently,
Okay.
whenever you borrow money, there's that risk, right? What if you are unable to pay off that mortgage or something
Okay.
happens, right?
Yeah.
We were in the real estate industry during the '08 crash. We
Oh
saw,
yeah, absolutely. It was a
right,
disaster for everybody.
right? People lost a lot of wealth in that situation, right? That equity, all of them. I benefited from it. Okay, I was out there buying property. Okay, but the people who
See, people,
oh,
just letting you know, Eric said that he benefited from buying properties that
okay,
he's now renting to you.
yeah. I'm always an advocate for real estate. I am a real estate attorney. This is what I do. All right. But I also want people to also understand that real estate, any investment involves risk, right? You buy
Absolutely.
Bitcoin or you
Stocks, everything.
stocks, and there's always risk. But there's risk that's very uh, different from other, because you're not borrowing money. I hope you're not borrowing money to play the stock market, right? But in a house situation, yes, you are borrowing money to buy that asset, right? Minimum, you only have to put 20% down, right?
Or less than
And then
that
you,
sometimes.
or sometimes less than that, right? And then the bank is one that assumes all the risk, right? Right? And lending out that money to you to own this asset, right? So it does, on average, and most people who own a home throughout their lifetime, because of the fact that it appreciates and it's a forced savings account, does grow their net worth substantially, right? But
Yes.
we also have to consider the risk, which is you're borrowing money to do it. This house is not necessarily will appreciate. There are times in our historical real estate market that there has been downturns
Yes.
on top of that, right? And
Yeah.
then on top of the risk is now you're subject to what we can very clearly see, environmental risks, right? We have hurricanes that blow down houses, flood houses in certain sections of the country. We have wildfires, as we clearly can see happening in LA, that can really cause you to lose that wealth, right? We have
Mhm.
earthquakes in California, we have tornadoes in the Midwest, right? We have blizzards up in the east, right? These are all risks that affect whether or not you're going to actually have that wealth at the end of the 30 years that you pay off this, right? So
Okay.
the-
But you're making it sound like these risks are very, very excessive versus
no, 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 no.
like,
Well, that's why we have insurance, right? Presumably, to hedge against that risk, we buy homeowners insurance. The lender requires homeowners to have lenders insurance because obviously the bank doesn't want to lose out all their money in the event of these natural disasters, right?
correct.
Um, but it is still a risk that people need to understand. That's very different from any other investments, and that I'm an advocate for diversity. So, but it should be in everyone's wealth growing portfolio to have a house, okay? Because it is a good tool to build equity and save, and so grow your net worth.
Yeah. And I think for me, honestly, the biggest benefit in owning your own home instead of renting, and here it is, okay? Everything else we can put aside and for argument's sake. At the end of the day, if you buy a home, right, your mortgage is fixed. If you get a 30-year fixed mortgage, right?
Yes.
And let's say your mortgage is 3,000 a month, right? Or in San Diego, it might be a little higher because prices are higher unless you come with a larger down payment. But if you're renting a house in San Diego, I mean, you're still in the neighborhood of about $4,000, $4,500 for a single family, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so as a result, that 4,500 in 10 years is not going to be 4,500. That rent is going to be significantly higher in 10 years versus if you buy your own home, then you're going to stay there long term. I'm not saying that you're one of these speculators and buying and moving and speculatively. You're buying this house and you're just living in it like a normal working person. In 10 years your mortgage is still the same. It hasn't changed, right? And while during those 10 years you've been putting some of that money into the principal of it. And then on top of that, there are tax benefits to being a homeowner. There is some tax benefit to being a homeowner. You don't get a write-off for being a renter. Your landlord does, but
Correct.
you don't.
So again, I want to play devil's advocate. This is not to say that I'm not an advocate of buying a house, okay? But I think people should also understand that there's a mobility cost to this. Yes, your mortgage is fixed. That means for the next 30 years that you own this house, your mortgage is fixed. I completely concede on that point. As a renter, yes, the landlord is free to increase your rent or even decrease your rent depending on what the market is. All right. And on top of that, as a renter,
Eric, have you ever decreased a rent before on any of
no,
your
I, I
rentals?
have I have not, but that's because the market hasn't. All right, I have not increased rent for certain. I take that back. I actually have decreased rent during the pandemic. Okay, I actually have that, just because I was a nice landlord and I did that. Anyways, all right. Presumably, if it's market factors could cause a landlord to decrease rent, as every if rent has decreased, and we see in San Diego actually rent has actually decreased year over year
Yes.
recently,
Yes,
right?
it has.
Right.
It
So
recently
it is
has. Correct.
possible, right? But okay, but guess what? If I'm a tenant and I'm renting and my landlord is still increasing my rent when all the other houses in the area has lowered their rents below what I'm currently paying, I can just say I'm not renewing and I'm moving, right? But on top of a mortgage, what's other costs that's going to increase that prevents me from just selling a house, like homeowners insurance, right? Homeowners insurance in certain sections of the country has increased almost to a point where it's more or if not the same as a mortgage payment. What that means is, as a homeowner, I bought this to live in here for the next 30 years. I have to eat up that increasing cost. I can't just sell and move on to and buy something else, right? So
But
that
in that
that
case, I mean, if you were a landlord and if you were renting, to that argument, if you were renting though, and that increase in mortgage or interest or whatever taxes, your landlord is going to very likely pass it on to you.
But it's more dictated whether they do that on what the market rent is. Like I said, as a renter, I could just easily say, "Sorry, Mr. Landlord, I'm not renewing my lease. I'm going to move down the street because they're offering much lower rent." Right? As a homeowner, I can't just say I'm selling this house because my insurance premium is increasing each year, or my property tax. It's a much higher barrier to it. That's why I say it's a mobility cost, right? That people are not factoring in. It's much easier for a tenant because they don't own this, right? They could just say I'm moving or whatever. It's that flexibility, right? Versus if I'm a homeowner and I'm like, I gotta eat this homeowner's insurance increase.
Yeah. And so to that, I'm going to share this basically this slide that shows you a breakdown, right? So it's basically a look at a comparison of homeowners versus renters. And this is, in the trillions of dollars, over in the United States as of 2022. And so I pulled it from, the Federal Reserve. So from a reliable source. Anyways, so if you look at it carefully, what you're going to see is there is a significant amount of equity in the overall primary home, right? There's about almost $41 trillion worth of value in real estate that is owned by private individual. And then there's some other ones down here, bonds and things like that. And then if you look at from a renter's perspective, like just the data, same type of situation, but not only does it seem that the renters seem to be able to seem to invest less, but look at the overall primary resident, equity. There isn't any, and that's across the board, right? And so this is why I think by when you become a homeowner, you're kind of required to take more responsibility for your actions and things like that. And so what ends up happening is you try to be a little bit better steward of your own money. And so, I think this is where the discrepancy is. And, I say 40 times as wealthy, which doesn't really like resonate and make sense to people. Like, okay, well, what the heck does that mean, right? But if you look just here, I mean, like, if imagine if you're somewhere in between, like you're like my age, right? So I'm between 45 to 54 here, and based on this data as of 2020, there's like $8 trillion worth of equity that was built up by the individuals in this class, in this category. And down here, these individuals are, they're close to retiring, right? And they're still going to have
Well,
to pay more rent.
I want to be. I like this chart. This is the first time I'm seeing it because you don't show me this before this, so I have to really try to figure out and analyze this. Let's take the top portion where homeowners, and let's eliminate the three lines. It's like primary residence, other residential, real estate, and vehicles and non-financial assets. Those are all like physical assets. Okay,
Okay.
let's just compare the bottom four sections from business interests. Those are like the equities type of
Yep.
things. There's a huge discrepancy. I'm just looking at all households. Okay, and when you bring up a very good point, it's like a chicken and egg, which came first type of. Is it because people who are just naturally wanting to have the discipline to invest money are buying houses? Or is it because once you buy a house, you become good stewards of money and know how to be financially savvy, right?
That's a
It's
good
what
question. That's a very
it's a
valid question because
causality
I
type
don't
of
know the
issue,
answer to that.
okay? Because I can say this is what my original point. You can be a renter, and if you allocate and know how to invest your money and put it in retirements, business interest, stocks, and bonds, you could still be in a good financial position and not own a home, right? Or is it because everyone that is financially savvy is gonna buy a house, right? So it's that causality question that I think that is not fully reflected in this chart here.
Yeah, but this is data. I mean,
Yeah,
regardless of the rationale of why the data is what it is. This is the data that was
the data
collected.
does show. I agree. This chart does show that as if you are a homeowner, your worth is significantly more than renters, which
Yeah,
should be.
significantly.
I hope so. Otherwise, no one would be buying real estate then.
Correct. And then so like let me give you this one. This is more of a uh kind of it's a graph so that therefore it's able to show you just the discrepancy, right? I mean, the blue line is obviously the median housing wealth, and then the bottom line is, obviously the median financial and things like that. But the people who generally own, who have real estate, I mean, you see the discrepancy just in this chart alone.
Hmm. Correct.
And again,
Right.
it goes back to my thing is like, I think the advice I give everybody here is, if you can afford to a home, buy a home. The key
Absolutely.
word is afford.
Afford. If you can buy a house and you've saved up for a down payment and you can qualify for a loan and you plan to live there for the next 5 years at minimum, absolutely buy a house. Okay. Because in on average you will gain, you will profit from it because it's an appreciating asset. That I
Yeah.
completely agree. Okay.
And then I also took the liberty of kind of doing a little bit of research on looking at the median value of homeowners based on age bracket, right? And so if you just look at homeowners versus renters, um, you know, again, you see the discrepancy in total financial asset, because this is a better look for you, Eric, because it brings into the picture of, again, this on average based on age, how much of these individuals hold other types of investments, right? And then also, but you see down at the bottom, obviously the homeowners have significantly more debt because those are their home debt, right? And the thing is, but looking down at just total net worth based on age, the discrepancy is massive. I mean, you're talking, you know, thousands of percentage
Yeah,
higher.
yeah. Real estate has appreciated tremendously, um, and presumably will continue to appreciate on average, 3 to 5% each year. But again, a lot of this is also because you're paying down a mortgage, right? That's what's increasing a lot of people's net worth. It's because you're borrowing 80%. Once that 80% is gone and you own 100% of something, right? So if you calculate it, it's you buy a house for $1 million, you put down 200K, you borrow 800K, right? Technically, at that point, when you first bought that house, your net on that is 200K, what you put down, right?
Yep.
Over the span of 30 years, all that 800K gets paid to zero. So now your net worth just then increased to 100%, $1 million dollars plus whatever your property has appreciated.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if it has appreciated, let's say, like you said, 3 to 5% a year on $1 million, you're talking about anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000
Right.
each year.
As a renter, you don't have that kind of investment vehicle option. Absolutely. You're just throwing the 2000 or $3,000 a month, and you're not gaining anything whatsoever from that. No tax benefits, no nothing. I completely agree. Right. And that's why homeownership is a very strong wealth growing vehicle. And I mean that's just how it is. Just because that's how buying real estate works, right?
Yeah. And I think also this country has really tried to encourage home ownership. That's the reason why our government has given so many, tax benefits and tax credits and things like that, deductions for paying interest and things like that. I mean, some of our viewers may know that, it wasn't that long ago. Well, I guess it was back in the 80s and 70s where you can actually get, tax deductions when you buy a car, right? You'd buy a car, you'd make interest payments on the car, and you can actually deduct the payments. Like, we don't see that anymore, right? And there's even talk about, potentially getting rid of the tax benefits for owning real estate, right?
Yeah.
And
So people always tell me that there's the tax benefits of owning real estate, and absolutely, yeah. Right now, real estate, you get all these, but I always say that's not guaranteed. We used to be able to unlimited the property tax portion we can deduct, right? I believe under Trump, he capped it to was a 10 grand, right? Or something. So these laws and tax benefits do change, and there's been talk of getting rid of like 1031 exchanges. There's been talk of, you know, and on top of that, what I've heard is most people these days. Again, I'm not a CPA, so I can't remember. Is if you take the standard deduction, do you still get to deduct your mortgage interest? I can't remember. I don't. Right.
yeah, I that would be a CPA
That would be a
question. Yeah.
CPA. Nonetheless, most people take the standard deductions these days and don't really itemize things. So whether or not the tax deductions actually benefit you is really dependent on your financial situation, right?
Yeah, but I think with the standard deduction, you would have to basically say that everything else that you deducted is still smaller than you
Correct. Yeah.
going through and itemizing, and that's why you would take the
So
standard.
people just throw, and I work with a lot of first time home buyers, right? And they always says, well, they always ask me, all right, should I buy a house? Should I not buy a house? And they always say, well, there's this tax benefit, right? And I said, these tax benefits may not be necessarily applicable to you, or you may not actually be able to utilize the full benefit of these tax benefits, right? And I always say, the best time to buy a house, okay, isn't, because someone on TikTok or Instagram told you to. It's if you are financially ready to. You've got your ducks in a row, you've got your down payment, you've spoken to a lender and gotten pre-approved. You know that a mortgage payment isn't gonna, stress you out every month, right? And I see people, a lot of these, especially recently, since the pandemic, because everyone was like, I gotta buy a house, interest rates are so low, and then they end up regretting it because either their mortgage payments are too high or they bought a lemon because they didn't, going back to our previous episodes about due diligence, right? So
Yep.
it's absolutely, I agree, it's a good wealth tool, building tool, but people need to understand what they're getting themselves into. It's not
Yeah.
because I
And
buy
I
a house and I'm going to be a trillionaire. Okay.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree that there are some disadvantages. Like if there's a roof leak, you're the owner. Well, guess what? You're the one calling the roofer, right? And if you get displaced from the house because of, let's say, a flood, then you're the one paying for the hotel room, right? So there are a lot of, differences. And the other thing is, you know, there are pros and cons. At the end of the day, I still think that if you, and this is my advice, is don't buy it unless you can afford it, right? And then there's you've probably heard, even Eric, some of these people will buy a property and then they'll do what they call a life hack, right? On real estate,
House
where
hacking.
they're
House
house
hacking.
hacking.
Yes.
Yeah, where they buy like a house and then they put four roommates in there with them in order to be able to afford it, because they're like, well, then my roommates are paying my thing. And what they don't realize, and we talked a little bit about this in our last episode, which is, um, when you house hack, that person becomes a tenant,
Yes.
and they may not want to leave, they may not pay you, and then it just creates a whole set of different other issues.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
that lady got locked out of her own house in Encinitas, a $2.5 million house, because the lady that she rented a room to locked her out.
Correct. Yeah. I that yeah. Um and that's why sometimes, again, we're on a real estate podcast, YouTube show. Sometimes I would say, it may be better in certain situations to be a renter until, you've got your ducks in a row to actually afford a house. Okay. Because it is an investment and there's risk, and people need to understand the risk. And unless you're financially prepared, you're going to be very stressed out owning a home. Okay.
Yes, that is definitely very possible. So for those of you who are currently watching and you're curious, what you can do is, if you go on our page, um, I put together this basically article that talks about the financial benefits of actually being a homeowner. And I wrote this so that you guys can just get additional information. So chime in below, reach out to me on my website, and I'd be happy to send that over to you so that you guys can then see, just whether or not it fits your need, right? I mean, I always say people buy homes for different reasons, right? Um, when they get a new job, typically they have to buy or sell because they're going to move, right? Or when they have kids, a one bedroom may not be conducive to, having, two spouses and three kids, right? It'll be too crowded. Things like that, divorces, marriage. There's so many reasons why people buy and sell homes. And I think, going back to what you had said earlier, it's really about your personal need. And if you're not sure whether or not it's right for you, this is when it's important to talk to a professional, and
Correct.
not just a sleazy salesman who's going to try to sell you something, right? Somebody who's going to actually have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Scott. You're gonna hate me, but I do get calls, as I mentioned, from a lot of prospective home buyers, and unfortunately, sometimes after I give them the frank, point of view of versus renting versus, they're like, maybe I should just stay a renter for a few more years to build up, uh, a down payment, or more a higher down payment, or at least have some sort of contingency fund in terms of repairs that might be needed, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, if they're not financially ready, I am the last real estate agent to tell them they should buy something. I'm like, dude, you realize you're going to open a bag of worms, that you're just going to be stressed.
right. But ultimately, everyone that I've spoken to, they do say at some point in their life they do want to own a home, right? Whether it's at 25 or 35 or even 45 or even later in life, right? The point is, you want to figure out when it's the right time for you, because if you're like one of those people is like, I'm living here for 6 months, there for 6 months, another place for 6 months, then why are you buying a house, right?
Yeah.
Why are you buying a house?
Yeah.
That makes no sense, right? So I think that people should really um, be a little more well-rounded in terms of understanding what home ownership is like. Trust me, I know what home ownership is like. It's tell that to the people in Los Angeles right now what home ownership is like. Okay, it's not
That's
all
their last problem, dude. That's the
exactly
least of their worry.
right. Um, it you could devastation happens and you could lose everything, right? California hasn't had an earthquake in a long time, but we are in that zone, and if that big one hits, again, if your wealth is all tied up into real estate, you could be losing a lot, right? Hopefully, insurance can cover your losses, or at least help you rebuild. But there's other financial impacts in those type of situations versus I'm a renter. I just move on and rent another place after something like this happens, right?
Yeah. The other thing is maybe what we should do is we should bring in an insurance specialist, because we do want to talk about insurance. And like right now, there's so many issues with insurance, right? Insurance company leaving California and things like that. I would be really curious to see how the insurance market is going to all play out in California over time.
That's we can definitely delve in since we have probably some time here, but insurance is one of those things that I call a necessary evil.
Well,
Okay.
I call lawyers that too, though. I'm sorry, Eric. I'm
That's
just
fine. Hey, I'll take it. It is. We are a necessary evil, right? But insurance in particular is because if you borrow money, that's one of the requirements that you have to have. All right. It's you gotta buy the insurance. And guess what? The purpose of insurance is to diversify the risk pool. It's to pool the risk, right? Something happened in LA. Guess what? These insurance companies also have insured all these other homeowners throughout the country that, they're still paying premiums and they're going to offset whatever the insurance pays out to, compensate the LA homeowners, right?
yeah,
That's why it's called diversing that risk pool, right? But the problem is it occurs when you start shrinking that pool, right? What California insurance company has basically said is, we don't want this risk here. It's a money losing business for us to insure these homeowners because every year there are wildfires or there's other natural disasters, right? So we're gonna eliminate that pool or that section of the pool and just insure those people that live in a place that has no natural disasters, right? In which case, it's a profit driven model. And then on top of that, California in particular, because they restrict how much premiums can increase each year, that really disincentivizes insurance company from doing business in California. And once you have a lack of supply, but still amount the demand, guess what? That's when insurance companies can start increasing your premiums substantially because
yeah.
that's all you have, right? On,
Well, I
on
mean,
top of that, or people then start using the Cal Fair plan, which, speaking of which, I wouldn't be surprised if that plan right now is insolvent. Okay, so um, that's just the realities, right? And so
yeah,
that's
and
why.
I think a lot of insurance companies are requiring homeowners buy the Cal Fair plan in conjunction with their normal homeowners insurance now as well.
Oh, really?
I'm
Okay, I
starting to
didn't
see
know.
that.
You're
Yeah.
starting to see
So
that. Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah,
I had
yeah.
no
It's
idea.
it's where they have to buy the primary insurance, and then because the problem is the number of insurers that are still in California have decreased, right? The big four left.
Yeah,
Allstate, State Farm, Farmers, they've all left. But that's just not a California thing. That's a other state thing.
Yeah, other states,
Florida, for
Florida,
example, is another
hurricane. Yeah,
state that these insurance companies have just completely left
yeah.
because the risk to them is just too high. And that's what they're saying.
Correct, correct. So it is a problem as we have more of these natural disasters and there's substantial losses being occurring. I mean, if insurance are going to be for profit driven companies, how can I blame them from trying to eliminate that business risk, right?
Yeah.
If I was the insurance company, I would be like, why am I insuring all the California homeowners? I have to pay out every single year to compensate them. I'd rather just not do business in California. That's a
Yeah.
very logical thing for a business to do.
Yeah.
Um, how a lawmaker is going to fix that, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
for the elected officials to do, not me.
Yeah. So like for me, for when we first started this podcast, I was going to touch, home ownership obviously allows you to build equity. It's a forced savings account in a lot of ways. There are some tax benefits. Long term, there are like financial stability, because I'm kind of summarizing, for being a homeowner versus a renter, because your bank, as long as you keep paying them on a 30-year mortgage, isn't going to raise your mortgage amount. There are definitely barriers to entry, and this is what we talk about when not everyone can come up with 20% down. Also, the impact in inflation, because as inflation keeps going up, what ends up happening is home ownership does help you control some of that inflationary cost. And then obviously generational wealth building, if your parents, your grandparents can will or give you assets over time, you get the step up basis and all of that, right? And then obviously things like just lifestyle in general and behavior factors. And this is kind of what goes into what we were talking about. Is it the chicken or the egg? Are the homeowners financially typically wealthier than renters because they are homeowners, or is it because um, they are more responsible and that's why they buy a house? Yeah, these are
Really
all good.
difficult to say. I'm sure. I truth be told, there are financially irresponsible homeowners out there. Okay, I do know that. So it's not just to say, but I guess in the aggregate, in terms of the average, if you are able to at least save down for a down payment and at least financially qualify for it, the presumption is you at least, in the eyes of mortgage companies, are deemed worthy to buy a house.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, for me personally, I think home ownership is the most important thing that people should do.
Okay.
I think there's a certain level of pride of ownership in the home. I've been a renter in my life in the past. I'm a homeowner now. I have rental property, and the thing is, for me, when I go home at night, right, and I'm pulling into my garage, and I'm like, wow, like even to this day, like it still amazes me. Like I've lived in my home for years, and I'm like, wow, this house is mine, right? And it's like it just just a certain level of like satisfaction and I feel good about it because I worked really, really, really hard to be able to afford to buy that.
Yeah, it absolutely. It comes with everyone that does buy a house is very proud that they're able to achieve that. It's a big milestone in someone's life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, but I also don't want viewers, again, we're on a real estate podcast, okay, but to think that I'm a failure in life if I never own a house. Okay, that's not
No, 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 no. We're not saying that here. No,
right.
absolutely not. We are
Right?
not saying that.
Yeah, like I can never reach the level of someone's wealth as someone that owned a house, just being a renter all my life. It's possible, and I know there are people out there who can claim that, hey, my net worth is equivalent to someone owning a house. I don't own a house, right? I
Yeah.
just was disciplined in investing. I bought, stock at the right time or whatnot, and great. Um, and because I talk to a lot of prospective home buyers, again, they always spiel the same thing that we've talked about on this podcast just now about the benefits of homeownership, and they read the same articles that's been presented here. But I always like to, and this is me as an attorney, right? I'm always the person that is, as a previous show, I say I am the deal killer. All right, real estate agents do not like me because I'm always the person, the devil on the, or I like to say I'm
Devil's
the angel
advocate.
on the shoulder, but you probably call me the devil on the shoulder, going, "Hold on here. Let's look at the other things that agents are not telling you about what owning a home is like." Right? Are you?
Yeah, but this is why I have you on the show. I am trying to balance it so that it's not all one real estate agent telling the public, "Oh, you should buy a real estate now, right now." I hate it when agents say, "When's a good time to buy?" Right now. It's always now, right? When's a good time to sell? Now. And then you're like, "Well, that kind of contradicts each other." It's
Yeah.
not always necessarily now, right? It depends on the individual's personal situation. And then if you're not sure, talk to somebody who is really experienced, like Eric, like myself, to help guide you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do
So
you think in the long run, though, again, this is the trajectory as home ownership does become more expensive, housing prices become more expensive. Do you see that there's going to be a larger population that stays renters for a longer period of time?
I think that's already happening. So my opinion is that I'm seeing the number of people choosing to rent instead of owning, especially in California because our mortgage, our real estate prices here are so high, right? And those people who want to own but can't, they generally leave California. And this is what's causing a lot of the other states to have their real estate prices go up because some Californian shows up with $2 million cash because they just sold their property and then they can outbid everyone and buy a house there all cash, right? So I'm seeing that, but I think long term, yeah, I think there will be more renters, but I think there's more renters not because people don't want to buy, but because the barrier to entry is getting harder, right? If you look at statistics and data, um, over the last 30 years, income has really only gone up a factor of 4 to 5x versus the cost of real estate has gone up as much as 20, sometimes 30x. And it's just you can't catch up because the price of homes just have gone up so much faster than the average person's income. And so, this is why I tell people, like, if you want to buy a home and you can afford it and you can manage it, buy it as soon as possible
Okay.
because you're going to be buying more than likely a growing asset. Here's the thing, though, Eric. I want to continue before I let you chime in. Is the only way I think we will see a decrease in real estate valuation, right, is if there's a significant amount of homes coming into the market, right? And right now, if you look at data, which I have, most of the homes assets are owned by baby boomers, right? And the baby boomers, yes, eventually will pass away. They will then will it to their children, their heirs. More than likely, it'll probably be Generation X. And then the thing is, and some millennials. And then the thing is that I think because there is not enough homes available still, prices of real estate will keep going up. The only way to increase enough homes is if the country, the state, and the local municipalities agree to lower the standards or change the standards of building in such a way that it makes it easier and more cost effective to build, right? Why is it that if you look at new construction and new home builders, they don't build starter homes? You don't see them building starter homes. They build these 3,000 square foot houses because The barrier for them to get permits, land, and all of this stuff is so hard and so difficult and expensive that by the time they're ready to build, they're thinking, well, why should I build an entry level home? Why don't I just build a really expensive luxury home and then sell it for more money so I can make a bigger profit? There's no incentive there to build starter homes. And so what happens is, this is why we're seeing this when, you know, literally year after year, in decades of this has happened, right? And this is all kind of led to this ultimate point, which is a shortage of homes, right? If you have tons of money, there's no problem finding a house or real estate. They're out there. It's the
Okay.
people that are needing to buy something in the 700,000, 800,000 range that they're struggling
Right.
because they can't find the supply.
So I'm a renter. Let's assume let's do this, and I want to get your advice to someone who is in the situation that I'm describing. Okay, I'm a renter. I just recently graduated, UCSD, landed a biotech job at one of the local biotech firms, making maybe 70 to 80K a year. I'm renting, right? Obviously,
Yep.
my first thing is I'm going to be renting, right? Now, I want to at some point own a home. So, Scott, as a renter that's paying quite high rent, I'm assuming, especially if you're living in La
Very high.
Jolla, what do I need to do now to, you know, get to my goal of owning a home?
That's a very good question. And I would say the first thing is be money wise. And I think, don't buy stupid shit is, is what I have to say. People like to spend money, people like to show off. I know partying out, going out drinking and having fun with your friends. I know it's very, very appealing. But those alcoholic beverages are $20 a piece, right? You have a few drinks. I mean, eventually over time, this stuff adds up. So I think being my number one advice to you would be very fiscally responsible. Save as much as you can save, right? And so the rule I usually, when I train my agents to be successful, I always tell them, I was like, figure out your survival cost, which your budget for survival. How much is that? Bare minimum just to survive. Then, right, you have to add into that your taxes that you're gonna have to pay Uncle Sam. And then and then try to put away 20 to 25% of your money, right? Save it. And if you still have extra money, let's say you're lucky enough to still have money that you're just left, then go ahead. Be my guest. I'll let you blow it all, right? Just spend it. You don't have to necessarily be like a measly miser, saving every pinching pennies and then hating your life. That's, our life is short. So I'm one to say we should enjoy our life, our existence. We should have companionship. We should do things like that, but not at the cost of your future, is what I'm saying. So save as much as you can and then learn the power of leverage. I am all for putting money in the stock market and investing, even though I'm not very good at it because I've lost a lot of money in the stock market, right? And so the thing is for me, the power of leverage in real estate. If you take $100,000 and you invest it in the stock market, and if you're smart enough to get 10% a year, I am not. If you're smart enough to get 10% a year, right, then that means you're going to make $10,000 every single year. But if you can afford to buy a $500,000 property, you put $100,000 down, right? If that property on a $500,000 goes up 10%, because I just, for math purposes, it just makes it easier for me, that's $50,000 in equity that you gain versus the 10 on the same $100,000 that you invested. So there is that leveraging power of owning real estate. And this is what I'm seeing, because I'll share you with you a story. I had this client that was referred to me by a friend, and this was 7 years ago, and they were qualified, husband and wife, 2 kids. They were qualified to buy up to $750,000. 7 years ago, for 750, you can buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family home in Rancho Penasquitos, Rancho Bernardo, for that amount of money, right? 7 years ago.
Mhm.
That same house today, 7 years later, is worth about 1.1. But their buying power has not increased to catch up to 1.1. They can still only afford 750.
So to play again devil's advocate, a lot of what I hear in talking to the renters, right? They say it's like I'm always chasing the mouse, right? Real estate prices are increasing. I feel like I'm saving, right? I have to pay rent, which is still very high in San Diego. I can't, I just, if in order for me to be able to save to a point where the down payment is comfortable for me for my monthly payments, I'm going to be saving for, 20, 15, you know, 15 years, 20 years potentially.
You're literally chasing something. To use your explanation, you're literally chasing something that is moving faster than you.
Yes.
You're not going to catch up. You just won't. So when I bought my first place, I wasn't proud of it. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is a beautiful house. I mean, it was a place for me to go to sleep, right? So it's getting in the game for me. When I bought my first place, I was in my early 30s. I think I was like 31 when I bought my first place, right? And it was a tiny little condo. I still own that condo today, right? And I can rent that condo minusing all my expenses. I still net like $600 a month, right? But I bought that condo a long time ago, right? It's getting in the game. And I think that sometimes when you want to buy your dream home, being your first home, that's when you struggle, because you're not willing to say, hey, look, let me just get in the game. And sometimes just getting in the game is important, right? Having a
Absolutely.
seat at the table at least gets you started. Now, I could have sold that property, right? Taken the equity that now I have. I probably have, maybe $350,000 of equity in that condo I own. If I sold it today, I could have 350,000. Then now I can use that 350 to buy a 1.2, $1.3 million property and still meet my 20% down payment, right? Now I can afford something significantly more expensive
Right.
to grow. So it's just get in the game, people. If you can afford it, get in the game. If you can't, then you need to change your skill or get a job that allows you to be able to earn more, that you can allow you to get in the game. That's my recommendation.
Right. And I think what you bring up is a good point is, fortunately, I always see a lot of first time home buyers is they have this uh, they have this vision that their house is going to be what they see on HGTV, where it's like marble counters and big giant island. In the
12-foot
reality,
ceiling.
ceilings, and that's not happening, especially for your first house, right?
No, it won't.
And you got to lower that expectation and realize, well, my budget maybe is only going to be a 1-bedroom condo,
Yes. Or
but
a studio even.
or studio, but I know that in the long run, right, I can sell it off and I can put that towards a second house that's going to be more closer to my dream house,
Yeah.
and you keep going. And this is also something that differentiates from being a renter, is that you can keep updating, upgrading, and that's how you over time build wealth versus
Correct.
being a renter, where you really can't do that, right? It's not like I moved to the only thing is I moved to a cheaper place to live. Um, that just saves me some rent, right? That's not
And that's the
actually
problem with renting, Eric, is like I've seen it where now people have started renting in UTC, and then it's gone up so much they can't afford it, so they move to Mira Mesa, and then it's gone up so much that they can't afford it, so they'll move to National City, and then they can't. It's National City has gone up to so much that they can't afford it, so they move out of state.
Yeah, the rent
Right?
does increase. I completely agree. So, yeah, so I think that as a renter, if you're listening to this, you're a renter, and a lot of renters do listen to these type of real estate podcasts. They always want to buy a house, right? I think it's really understanding what your the realities is in terms of home ownership is your first house is not going to be your dream house. Okay,
Nope.
and it's this type of thing that I really think differentiates renters from um, renters are like, I can now rent my dream home. Okay, buyers are homeowners are, I can eventually buy my dream home, but I gotta take this first step, and 20 years down the line I can
Correct.
buy my dream home. Okay,
Yeah, and
and
you know what? That point that you just made.
that delayed gratification is ultimately what differentiates renters from home buyers, is because I have the financial sense to know that I can give up the gratification of buying, going out and partying and putting that money in the bank to save so I can buy a house, right? It's that type of habits that people have, right, that really differentiates from renting and home ownership. And I think that's really important to point out to viewers.
Yeah, and the thing is also going back to it is when you when you buy a home, it's yours. When you rent, you're helping someone else build their net worth. You're helping someone else. I mean, it's just I love this image. I found it on the internet, and it's like every time I see it, it's like the renter is the one fishing, and then the owner is taking the fish from the renter. You know, and so the thing is, and I'm not one to encourage irresponsible financial situations. Be smart with your money. One of the steps of wealth building is also real estate ownership. And if you can manage to do that and do it responsibly, don't wait. The longer you wait, the less likely it's going to be beneficial for you.
I agree, and I get calls all the time saying, "Oh, should I wait to the election or after the election to know who gets elected, or should I wait to mortgage rates come down? Should I wait and then this and this and this?" And ultimately, you figure out I've been waiting for 5 years. I now, as you mentioned, you talked to that person who 7 years ago didn't jump the gun, and now their purchasing power has eroded, right?
Yeah,
So
completely eroded.
and so I completely agree. If you're viewing this right now, if you have already your ducks in a row and all you're waiting is maybe the mortgage rates are going to decrease, don't wait. There's really no reason to wait, right? I always tell people you could just refinance. If you're really concerned about a higher interest rate, just refinance 5 years down the line, you'll be fine. All right.
And the
But
thing is also when if you can afford to make the mortgage payments of where the rent is or the interest rate is today, right? You're getting started.
yeah,
I mean, a lot of agents, use this cliche, rent the rate, date the house, or no, date the house, rent the rate,
no,
or
date
something
the
like I don't
rate,
even
marry the house.
marry the house. Yes, yes, yes. I'm sorry, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. No offense to my agent friends, but renters and buyers don't care about that, right? Like, oh, you can refinance later. So what? Right? So the thing is buy when you're ready, invest when you're ready, be financially responsible, and start sooner than later if you can manage it. Because just like anything else, if you're gonna spend, $50,000 to buy a Tesla, don't buy a Tesla. Maybe buy a house, right?
Yeah, definitely don't finance a Tesla.
Buy like a crappy car, right? Drive a crappier car, and so that as long as it runs, and then
Right.
just take that money and invest it.
And this is, I see a lot of we're, at least I'm a millennial. I think you're a millennial. I see a lot of these Gen Z people that's, the 20s right now. And a lot of them are kind of, demoralized in terms of ever being able to own a home, right? A lot of them says, I think I'm going to be a renter forever, right? And I tell them, look, just delayed gratification is really important in your 20s, right? You got to understand, if you could put away money in your 20s, you're going to be set for your 30s, and you're going to be in a much better position to buy a house versus anyone else that is in their 20s that's always out there, spending money, right? And I
Yeah.
think that with social media, with theirs, everyone's on the social media. They see all these people. Oh, look at, they're traveling, they're buying this, they're buying that, right?
And then they're trying to keep up with their friends.
Keeping up with the Joneses, right? That's how
Yeah.
it works. You just gotta shut it out. If homeownership is your goal and that's what you want, then you need to shut out everything else and you need to focus on that goal. Okay.
Yeah. And then you can reach out to me. Seriously, go to my website, reach out to me. I will help put you on a plan that will get you to home ownership as fast as reasonably possible, right? We will put you on a plan where we will teach you how to be financially responsible so that this way, it
I
may
like
be
that.
not this year, but in a couple of years, you're
I
going to buy
didn't
a
know
house.
that, Scott, you offered that kind of service. That's actually a very smart type of thing. Get them when they're, and let them save up, and then they'll use you to buy their house, right?
Yeah. And then you've just helped them because you've helped them learn to be financially responsible.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
So thanks, Eric. I really always have fun with you chatting. And this may be a boring topic for many people, but I think it's so important. It is so important for people that are wanting to have financial stability and freedom in the future. Because I see seniors that don't own homes that are now struggling to rent. And then I see seniors that have invested wisely, paid off their home. Their home is now worth a couple $1 million, and they're now selling it, downsizing into something smaller, right? And they're walking away with half dollars, $1.5 million in cash that they now can use in their golden years to live comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. All
All right.
right. Take care. I'll talk to you guys later. And if you guys have any questions, reach out to me on my website and we'll be happy to help you. Bye.
Bye.